I grew up in Washington, D.C. I was 15 years old, and I went to the March on Washington for Jobs and Freedom, and I was so inspired and struck by the thousands of people, it felt to me, who gathered that day in August of 1963. And that day I made a vow to serve people for the rest of my life, and so I have. And it's taken many forms. Some of those forms were pleasant, but all of them were beneficial, even the ones that were unpleasant. Thank you, Deanza, for welcoming me here. I'll be speaking about the importance of standing and knowing what you stand for. Even if you can only sit, what do you stand for? So that will lead me many places in conversation, but it's meant to be a conversation rather than me talking at people. So if you're not able to be at the talk today, just understand that that's something you can think about. One way we can stand is to vote. And another way that we can stand is to be kind and thoughtful with the people that we are around and the people who are in our families and our work, where we go to school, and all of the environments, at the bus stop, at the supermarket. We can be thoughtful and we can be kind. And most importantly, in order to keep standing, we have to be kind to ourselves. I think that love is overthought and underestimated because we live in a very media-oriented world. In the Western Hemisphere, we think that love is just one thing, or that there is only one kind of love. But the love in a human heart is immense. It is good. And it is a lever for liberation. When I came to be involved in movements, it wasn't because I hated something or I was fighting against something. It was because I loved the people that I was serving. And that's what we need to keep in mind, no matter how we serve. Love is a great power. Use it to transform your world. I'm remembering a story I was told about restorative practices around the world, and the person who brought restorative justice, as we now call it, it's a network and it's a movement in the United States, got the principles from indigenous people in Canada. Well, I remember being told a story about a village in Africa, actually more than a village, a number of villages, who form circle when something has happened, and accountability, responsibility, and stating clearly and without excuse what has happened, and then the other person gets to state how that harm impacted them, and anybody in the circle can also state. And then intentionally at the end, everyone is required to laugh. And that was the experience I had at the women's prison, not of laughter per se, but of the human connectedness, that we weren't a circle of strangers. We were a circle of friends. It was a circle of love. What's most heartbreaking for me about the women's circles is that they are also the responsible parent for their children, and they no longer have their children. Someone from the state, or if they're lucky, someone from their family does, like it was for me, John's mother, and I love her forever for this, took care of my daughter for those 2 years, and her aunts. But not everybody has that. The courts come in and take children away. That is so heartbreaking. However, they all support each other with that. They support each other with shifting the way they have been to the ways that they know they were put on the earth to be. And that's the humanity in it.
Born in Washington, D.C., January 5, 1948, Ericka Jenkins was the middle child of 3. After graduating high school in 1966, Huggins attended Cheyney State College, now Cheyney University of Pennsylvania. She then attended Lincoln University, an historically black school in Philadelphia. There she studied education and met John Huggins, who she married in 1968. She joined Lincoln University's Black Student Congress. Huggins has an M.A. in sociology from California State University, East Bay. Her thesis focused on an education model which proposed student-centered, community-based, tuition-free education for students to minimize the multi-generational race and gender trauma of American children of color. At Lincoln University, Ericka and John were inspired to leave school and join the Black Panther Party. Motivation came from a Ramparts magazine article that discussed the cruel treatment of a jailed Huey P. Newton.
I was on a college campus. David is right. I was at Lincoln University in Pennsylvania. I was 18 years old, and I read a magazine article, and the reading was predictable, about a young African-American man who was accused of killing a police officer. The picture, however, was appalling. The picture was of this young man strapped to a hospital gurney with a bullet wound in his stomach, with a seemingly huge, to me at that time, European-American police officer in full uniform laughing into the camera. I studied the picture for quite some time. I didn't even have tears for it. I was so appalled. I read further and found out that this man belonged to an organization called the Black Panther Party at that time for self-defense. I put the magazine article down and I looked out into the Student Union building once again, where students were frolicking, it seemed to me. They were playing bid whist and pool and absorbed in cruising for boyfriends and girlfriends, and I searched the room for John Huggins. Couldn't find him. Wrote him a note the next day. I am going to California if I have to walk. I am going to find Huey Newton and work in his defense. Are you coming? He said yes, and so we drove in his hoopty Plymouth Valiant across the country with my cat and a friend who thought that he was going to be found as a blues singer in Hollywood. We drove across the country and ended up, after dropping our friend off, in Los Angeles, in West Los Angeles, in a funky little apartment. And we took factory jobs while locating the Black Panther Party, which was easy to do because in almost every neighborhood, party members were selling the Black Panther Party newspaper, which was, you would call it underground, but it really wasn't. It was very above ground. You could find it everywhere. And it was news from all over the globe. David is right. We weren't just nationalists. We weren't just cultural. We were about global change, and this is what scared the government into minimizing our principles and calling us racists. We were about redistribution of the wealth, of the resources. All people, like that baby over there, deserve the best just because they're born. And there shouldn't be any people who have less because of their pink job, because of their size, their age, their class, their country of origin, the language they speak, their sexual orientation. And what I found when I read that little newspaper, it was only about 8 or 10 pages long, is that that's what the Black Panther Party was talking about, the end to oppression. I was inspired. And I joined right away, and I did anything from answering phones in Los Angeles, in South Central Los Angeles, which many people are afraid to go to. I still can't figure out why, because people live there and love one another there and birth their children there and have lived there and will live there. So we moved into South Central later, John and I. We were friends and then we were married, and we did everything. Sold newspapers, answered telephones, wrote letters to politicians, talked to people who were willing to donate resources of all kinds to us, and we lived a very simple life. When I got there, there were about 20 members of the party in Los Angeles. It was one of the first strong chapters of the Black Panther Party in the United States. I believe that I turned 19 during the time that I was doing all of these things. John Huggins was 23, or 22, sorry, 22. And we knew also that the local law enforcement and national law enforcement in the form of the Federal Bureau of Investigation tailed us and surveilled us at every turn. We knew that though what we were doing was unpleasant, that it was beneficial. And actually, many times we didn't think that we would wake up alive the next day. I still have such gratitude that I am alive, that they are alive. So the party also talked to people. That's mostly what our offices did. People came and went, and they would talk to us about, why don't we have food? How come the police are cracking our heads for no good reason? You know, my son's in jail. He didn't do nothing. Why is he there? They thought we had answers. And sometimes we did, but what we were doing is learning what the needs of the communities were. We were learning. We were in a steep learning curve, as a matter of fact. And the programs, the survival programs that David mentioned, came out of that steep learning curve. They did not come out of a book with ism on the end of it. They came from the people's hearts. We had a saying, we are serving the people, body and soul.
In 1967, John and Ericka Huggins arrived in Los Angeles and joined the Black Panther Party. John became leader of the Los Angeles chapter of the Black Panther Party. While at home with her daughter, Mai Huggins, John Huggins was assassinated on January 17, 1969, on the UCLA campus due to a feud between the Black Panther Party and a black nationalist group that was fueled by the FBI's COINTELPRO. His burial was in his birthplace of New Haven, Connecticut. She later had 2 boys, Rasa son Mott, whom she had with James Mott, lead singer of the Lumpin', the Black Panthers singing group. Following the funeral of John Huggins, Ericka decided to move and open up a new Black Panther Party branch. She led this new chapter along 2 other women, Kathleen Neal Cleaver and Elaine Brown. While involved with the Black Panthers, Huggins held several positions, both an editor and writer for the Black Panther Intercommunal News Service, and she served as director of the party's Oakland Community School from 1973 to 1981, and a member of the party's Central Committee. In 1969, members of the New Haven Black Panthers tortured and murdered Alex Rackley, whom they suspected of being an informant. Along with Black Panther Party co-founder Bobby Seale, Huggins was charged with murder, kidnapping, and conspiracy. Ericka Huggins was heard speaking on a tape recording of Rackley's interrogation that was played during the trial. The trial sparked protests across the country about whether the Panthers would receive a fair trial. The jury selection was the longest in state history. In May 1971, the jury deadlocked 10-2 for Huggins' acquittal, and she was not retried. The Panthers, who had taken Rackley and shot him, had already been convicted, and the public demonstration of internecine conflict and extreme violence sped the decline of the Panthers. While imprisoned, Ericka wrote her poetry awaiting trial from 1969 to 1971. Ericka created while incarcerated at Niantic State Farm for women. Writing about the poor social conditions she and her community endured, she viewed storytelling as a form of self-defense, personal agency, and educational activism. Her work is defined by themes such as love and hate, time and space, sexism and feminism, spirituality, racism and nationalism, insights and poems, a book of poetry co-written by Huggins and Huey P. Newton. In 1972, Ericka Huggins moved to California and was elected to the Berkeley Community Development Council. After spending 2 years in prison, Huggins decided to leave the Black Panthers after being a member for 14 years, the longest membership of any woman. In 1976, she was the first Black person elected to the Alameda County Board of Education. From 2008 to 2015, Huggins worked in the Peralta Community College District as a professor of sociology, African American studies, and women's studies. She taught sociology at both Laney College and at Berkeley City College, as well as women's studies at California State University. For more than 30 years, she has lectured at Stanford University, Cornell University, and University of California, Los Angeles, where she has spoken about education, spirituality, feminism, prison reform, and queer people of color homelessness. Huggins worked for 15 years at the Siddha Yoga Prison Project, where she led Hatha Yoga and meditation to groups including incarcerated people, public school children, and college students. At the Mind/Body Medical Institute, which works with Harvard Medical School, she continued sharing her spiritual practices for 5 years.
I taught myself to meditate when I was incarcerated. I was 20 years old. And mindfulness was not a fad. It was the way that I could stay sane and whole and be okay to see my baby daughter, who I'd been separated from, for an hour each Saturday. It also restored justice from my heart outward. Mindfulness makes a human being who practices it in any way that they want. There's no right or wrong way. And there are initiatives in schools that limit the reach of mindfulness by telling people it's not okay to be angry. It's not okay to feel hurt or to share stories that aren't absolutely pure of emotion. The more we talk, the more we heal. The more we heal, the more we can talk. And it just keeps going round and round. We practice mindfulness so that we can navigate the world with integrity, with accountability, with responsibility, and where necessary, with the ability to ask for forgiveness. That's restorative justice as well. What's happening is that we are beings trying to do the same thing. Move through the world while we're here, and we will not be here forever, with clarity, with love, with compassion, not pity, compassion, and with integrity. I wish I could think of a better word, but to describe what I'm meaning, there are a lot of words, but wholeness. So that our thinking, saying, and doing is integrated, so that our minds and our hearts and our bodies are moving all in the same direction instead of scattered. That's what mindfulness is to me. Acknowledging that there's a beautiful tree outside. Acknowledging the sound of the birds. Acknowledging that there are sounds around us. That's what I did when I was incarcerated, especially in solitary confinement. I became more aware, not hyper-vigilant. I'd come in with hypervigilance because I was always being stalked by the police and the FBI at the time. But aware of my connectedness to the world I live in. And first that starts, of course, with feeling connected to my deepest self that's unchanging and quite powerful. And we're all born with that power.